Many of you out there have been waiting a very long time for this day. George Lucas is finally giving his word when it comes to Star Wars, the sequel trilogy. Specifically, he's talking about girl bosses and his opinion on them. Ray, look out! So what is George Lucas shouting? Well, apparently it takes more than just pants to be a hero. Hello folks, welcome back to the Pro Channel, where we are so happy to have you each and every time you select one of our videos. Thank you so much. An attitude of gratitude here for you. Folks, we got a dandy of a video as we dive into George Lucas and his recent comments about disparaging his movies and his thoughts on this new wave of feminism where characters are utterly perfect so long as they're female. It's a video many of you have been waiting to hear because you've been waiting to hear what George Lucas had to say. Well, folks, wait no more. George Lucas is bashing the bad girl boss tropes. For those of you out there who might be saying, now, wait a minute, not all female heroes, heroines, no YouTube, we're not talking about that. They're not all bad. That's what George says too. He's defending what he did with Princess Leia. We'll explain with this article out of thatparkplace.com, the website that if you are not yet bookmarked, what are you doing? You should, so that you know what's happening on the rest of the headlines all over the web tomorrow. This by John Trent. George Lucas bashes girl boss heroes. You can't just put a woman in pants and expect her to be a hero. Well, this explains so much. Star Wars and Indiana Jones creator George Lucas bashed girl boss heroes while addressing criticism of his female Star Wars characters during an appearance at the Cannes Film Festival. Folks, you don't pronounce the S, it's French. They're weird that way. Where he received an honorary Palme d'Or. Always make the R be as weird and as guttural as possible. Variety reports that Lucas addressed criticism of his female characters, questioning, who do you think the heroes are in these stories? What do you think Princess Leia was? She's the head of the rebellion. Let's say that again, because we've been, George Lucas has not come out and said, what have you done with my Star Wars? He's not come out and said, I did not make a chauvinistic, patriarchal kind of story. And finally, we're getting, I think, the strongest kind of reaction you're going to get from a very meek kind of George Lucas. Who do you think the heroes are in these stories? What do you think Princess Leia was? She's the head of the rebellion. In other words, out of the original trio, Princess Leia begins as the most powerful character out of the three, period, flat out. That's it. She's the one that's taking this young kid who doesn't know anything and this boisterous, I know everything guy who can't do anything and trying to save the rebellion with these clowns. And it's the same thing, he says, with Queen Amidala. He then appeared to broaden his criticism to the general girl boss trend Hollywood has embraced to promote feminism. He said, you can't just put a woman in pants and expect her to be a hero. They can wear dresses. They can wear whatever they want. It's their brains and their ability to think and plan and be logistical. That's what the hero is. And I would further add to George's statement that what the hero is someone who overcomes an obstacle and in doing so grows to a new place. And I would also suggest that what we're doing when we watch entertainment, and we'll come back to the article in just a moment, folks, but what we're doing when we watch a movie, when we listen to a story, when we pay attention to entertainment, like there's a biological reason for doing this. It's not as if you just, the cosmos just decided that you needed to spend time listening to stories and therefore that's what we'll do. No, there's a reason for this. And that is that when you go to a movie and you watch the protagonist, you role play through that protagonist and you take on their persona for a short period of time. And in doing so, you grow because you play out in your mind how you would approach these moments. There's another powerful part of this too, and that is that when you go and you watch the protagonist, you also develop a certain level of empathy because you sit in their shoes for that movie time and you identify with this other persona that you take on during that time. And so one of the most uniquely grievous dangers that comes with this new tribalism that's arisen is that if we're not allowed to go into the shoes of another because of their skin color or because of their background or because of their religion or whatever. What arises out of that is the inability to have empathy with others who are unlike you in some way that perhaps is lesser than you could possibly find in personality differences. But I want to hand it to the ladies to start off today. And Kara, we'll go to you first. Kara, you, of course, are working with an entertainment company now that is robust and growing, finding larger audiences. And you're doing it, as of most recently, with a strong female character, but a proper strong female character who does not feel shoehorned into the role, who does not feel as if she is male light, Lite, if you get my drift. She's genuinely a strong female character. Could you talk to us about what you think about George's comments? Agree, disagree? Where do you think we might go in the future to find these strong female heroes that we need so badly without dropping the male component completely too?
Well, I think there's a balance of how you can handle a strong female character. Like one, you need to make sure that you're going to be putting in a character that is not just belittling those around them depending on whatever their gender is, their sex is. That shouldn't be a factor. You can't just go in and say, "Hey, this person is this," so they're automatically lesser of a human than I am. So this makes me a superior individual. I think that there is going to be a I think a balance does have to happen for it to be a believable character and one that you can empathize with. So I think George is on the right. I think he's in the right for saying, "Hey, like he sees these characters that Disney have been spitting out, and he actually has that a true creator's and a writer's understanding of what can make a female character strong without her being uh just a nasty person and have no growth. You want that growth to be able to sympathize with them."
Kara, let me throw a sort of a off the wall kind of idea to you, and we'll see where this goes. And panel, feel free to weigh on this as well. And then we're definitely going to go to Lorraine in just a moment. But I was talking with someone who had criticism of the Moana movie, which I think is one of Disney's best ever. I think it's a fantastic movie, and I think it really resonates with audiences. Now, that's opposed to, for example, I don't think that Frozen 2 is a good movie at all. And I think that Frozen, the original, is largely driven by the soundtrack. But this person was saying that Moana was part of the, what would you say? That Moana was part of the effort to take away the masculine hero's journey and to co-opt it into femininity. And I said, no, that's actually not true. And I think that originally this comes from someone that I respect, which is, if anyone out there has ever listened to Jonathan Pajot, he's in that circle with Dr. Jordan Peterson. And I think he had made this criticism. And I said, where I disagree on this is that Moana, that the trick that movie does is that it's essentially the Little Mermaid to some degree, right? So you have the princess who wants to go out and seek the adventure, and the father who is unwilling to let her go because he wants to defend her. And that's appropriate parental oversight, right? And so, but at the same time, he must let her go. And so that's what all parents have to experience with letting their child go out into the world and face the dangers that are out there, face the dragons. And so if you just take Moana from that standpoint and say, well, Moana, that's the traditional male journey to go out into the Odyssey and to go conquer things. But where that gets flipped is that Moana discovers in the end of the movie that her particular need in that film is to show empathy. And in showing the empathy, that's how she defeats the enemy, because the enemy is actually someone who's been aggrieved. And so by having that empathy to give back that which was taken from the enemy, then the enemy becomes her ally, and so Te Fiti is restored and all of that. Okay, so that's the Moana story, which is that there is an appropriate empathetic or empathic need for women in the adventure. And so I think that's a solid story from Moana. Where I think the Rey story went off the rails, Kara, is that Rey didn't have anything to learn. Maybe she did originally, but she never learned it, eventually. And so Rey starts off in the same place that Rey ends. And that's what this dangerous thing is, where the women go off on an adventure, but they don't actually learn anything because they're perfect the entire path through. And Kara, I think that's stealing from women, because I think that's stealing the adventure that women should get to have. What do you make of all of that? Do you think that Moana is an appropriate female character, an appropriate female adventurer? What do you make of
Yeah.
all that? It's very complicated.
I mean, I was one of those. I actually enjoyed Moana, and I may be the odd one out on this panel, but I did like both Frozen and Frozen 2. But I
Maybe
do
not so much
think
Frozen 2, but Frozen.
I liked the tone of Frozen 2. I liked the more Celtic theme of it. That's what really drew me there. But I do think I agree with you on the focus of Rey, about how there's just no progression. There's no character progression there. And it was the same like that with like Captain Marvel. It was just even-handed the entire way. There's no real threat to them. And there's no growth, and you want that from every type of character. I mean, I just watched Armageddon for the first time last night, and I mean, you see Bruce Willis. He starts off with, hey, like, this dude is hanging out and kissing all over my little girl. I don't like this. And by the end of the movie, he has respect for that man, and he's just like, I want you to take care of her. Like, there is progression and there is growth. Like, I think that is what makes a good movie, is being able to see that if you go through a hardship, you can learn from it.
It makes it so you don't want to miss the thing.
And a great Aerosmith ballad doesn't hurt to double up on Jonas's joke. Lorena, the original Star Wars trilogy. So many now have claimed, and perhaps they're so little, perhaps they're just so loud, have claimed that it's problematic, have claimed that it's insufficient, that it does not stand up to modern expectations and virtues. Lorena, what do you think? Should George even be in the position where he needs to defend the original Star Wars, considering where Disney is today?
He shouldn't have, but this is the world that we live in now. When George first came out with the Star Wars films, people were wrapped up in the story, the characters that he put together and put out there, that pretty much everyone could see themselves in. And I really think this is ridiculous. I think you have a group of people who think that films made before they were actually around or actually paid attention should be changed in order to placate them. And this goes to the premise of people thinking that they have the right to not be, quote unquote, offended. There's plenty of offensive things that are out there. Doesn't mean that you want to have the films, changed just to placate them. But it also goes back to this thing of, I'll say, the participation trophy. No one should have their feelings hurt. Everything should fit with what I want to fit. When I was a kid and I saw Star Wars, yeah, I kind of wanted, the equivalent of a blaxploitation film in space, but that's okay. We had Billy D. Williams, so that was fine. That was fine with me. I just really do think that it's ridiculous. And to go back to the strong female character trope, as far as I'm concerned, if you have to point out that a female character is strong, you haven't done your job as a
yes, Lorena. Oh my gosh, put that in a book. That's perfectly said. Wow. If you have to say it again, Lorena, if you have to say a woman is strong,
if you have to say a woman is a strong character, you did not do your job correctly as a storyteller.
Fantastic. Well, let me bring the guys in. Go ahead, Jonas.
There's something here that it is missing from this conversation, I think. There's the concept of the power trio in writing and in culture here. Kirk, Spock, and McCoy are a great example of that. Or id, ego, and super ego are a good example of that.
Are you excluding Scotty? How dare you, sir? Those
Well,
engines.
Scotty's not even on the bridge.
They just call them when they need them, you know.
He's the
Next, you'll tell me
engine.
groundskeeper Willie doesn't matter in Simpsons. You anti-Scott, you. Go ahead, Jonas. What's your point?
I'm very pro Scott. What are we even talking about here? That being said, okay. So Princess Leia is the only smart one. That's just kind of the point that George Lucas makes in this entire talk here. Id, ego, and super ego. Id would be an example of the character who does whatever he wants at all times. Han Solo and Chewbacca is a perfect example together because Chewbacca is kind of an extension of Han, at least when they introduce him in Star Wars. The guy who just goes, well, what if we just shoot him kind of guy, you know? The Greedo situation comes to mind. And Luke is our perspective character. And so he's supposed to be the balance of, you know, the guy who wants to shoot everybody and super ego. Until Princess Leia shows up, Obi-Wan Kenobi is part of the story. So you have this idealized, you know, guy who's supposed to have it all figured out. He's the one he's the Gandalf. He's sending them on the adventure. He knows what's supposed to happen.
He's the sage.
Right. He's the sage. Again, going to that idea of the monomyth there. As soon as he is gone, Princess Leia comes in and acts as the sage. She's the one who actually knows what's going on. I think even after Alderaan blows up, obviously Leia's in the movie before this point, but as far as the power trio goes, she's in there, and she's supposed to be the one that talks about what they're supposed to be doing, who they're supposed to be. She is the moral compass. Usually women are the moral compass because generally that's how it works in society, and there's a pretty good statement to be made about when women aren't the moral compass of society, then you look at what we have in America today, to use a cliche. You know, Ron, Hermione, and Harry are another great example of this. Hermione is the only intelligent one of the three in that power trio. So Leia, maybe she's not the one that's out there, you know, blasting people. Well, no, she does blast people. Maybe she's not the one with the lightsaber, at least until Disney gets their hands on it. But she is so critical, and she is definitely part of the heroes of the rebellion here. So I don't know. She's also supposed to be the face that launches 1,000 ships, to use another example here. It's supposed to be the fact that she's very pretty and Luke is drawn to her. Let's not talk about where that all ends up going later. But
subverted expectations, eh?
Well, yeah, that's just rewriting, of course. But there's no way he intended them to be twins when they started that whole thing.
You know, you really need to say spoiler alert, Jonas. That's
think
cool.
about.
I'm just saying that Princess Leia is the only one that has any intelligence after Obi-Wan Kenobi dies after he is killed by Darth Vader on the Death
Take
Star.
that, 3PO.
Spoiler alert.
Vash, let me read this for our friends out there who are listening via speakers and not watching on video, and then please continue with your thought. The article continues on. It says, not only did Lucas address criticism of his female characters, he also fired back at people unhappy that his Star Wars films did not have enough diversity based on character skin color. Lucas shared, they would say it's all white men. Most of the people are aliens. The idea is you're supposed to accept people for what they are, whether they're big and furry or whether they're green or whatever. The idea is all people are equal. Vash, continue, please.
No, I was going to continue on that point and Jonas's point, interestingly enough. If you look at Leia, Leia just had her entire planet destroyed. Now, I understand it's a little bit of an oversight, maybe not to have a significant reaction from her. Maybe they filmed that and cut it. Something happened there. But think about who consoles who there at the when Obi-Wan is struck down. It's
maybe
it's
a trillion
Princess
people,
Leia.
maybe a billion people die on that planet, and it's poor Luke. You lost your mentor you just met.
Well, she is that kind of matriarchal figure, and she has compassion for others, and she obviously is comforting Luke in a time of loss for him. Now, obviously, it's a little bit funny when you think about the other side of that coin, for sure. But can you imagine any of these girl boss characters of today doing something like that? I mean, you couldn't even imagine it. And yet she's very capable. She's the one that kills Jabba the Hutt, after all, especially after, putting her in that outfit. Everybody forgets that point, but, that has to be said right there. And she has a vulnerable side as well. Well, he designed a couple of things by himself, and very
He
interesting
designed a couple of
design.
outfits. And all of the outfits he made for his female characters had chokers on them. What's up with that?
It's astute observation, but you can see the vulnerability in her character as well. Like during that scene in Return of the Jedi, when obviously after Luke and Leia have that conversation right there, you just have this depth, these layers to this character. She wasn't just slapping Poe in the face and saying you're too hot for this kind of thing. There was a depth there that is really missing from the female characters of today. And that's honestly, I know this is going to be controversial, this is honestly why Furiosa for me was a little bit refreshing, because you had to see somebody who had a vulnerable side to her, that saw weakness in her, strength in her, and depth and character that kind of hard to express in 30 lines of dialogue.
Vash, I don't think that that's going to be controversial at all, because to have controversy, you have to have people go see something. So, folks, we'll talk about the weekend box office, the worst in history for Memorial Day, and we're going to bring the goods, the receipts, to show you just why that is. But before we do, Culture, I need to go to you, because we need to weigh in on one last thing that George Lucas had to say. He said in the past that robots were the ones who were being discriminated against in this galaxy far, far away. He says that was a way of saying, people are always discriminating against something, and sooner or later, that's what's going to happen. He said, we're already starting with AI, saying we can't trust those robots. Now, and we might talk about AI later in the show today, too, as we talk about what's happening in entertainment. But Culture, that's what George Lucas was trying to do with robots. That's a very deep and profound and philosophical kind of thing that he was interested in. Modern day Lucasfilm, when they go after the robots, they turn them into the fantasies of one reconfigured Lando. So is that maybe indicative of where we are in terms of maturity from George Lucas Star Wars to Disney Star Wars?
Oh, certainly. We've been watching this in real time, and it's not just Star Wars where they're trying to, put these issues together, turn everything into an opportunity to, make romantic moves on them. But the level of maturity in Hollywood is gone. Of course, the quality of filmmakers is much lower. You only have a handful of people that you can count on to produce decent entertainment. And when it comes to Star Wars, I would say that George got a lot of that messaging right. And again, he was able to target not just a younger adult, a young person audience. He also was able to loop in the adults in there as well. There was controversy in '77 about the film and the violence and the things like that. If I recall correctly, I am pretty old, but I as a
three-letter word, Culture. Careful, three-letter word there.
That's right. Well, as a young person seeing that film in the theaters, everything about it hit me in just exactly the right way. So when you talk about the level of maturity, there is no one demonstrating a level of maturity in Hollywood these days. Most of the greats have gone on to either retire or pass away, and now, you have a handful of filmmakers that are capable of it, and they're not doing very much of it. I would even argue that despite the fact that Vash liked the Furiosa film, Miller really showed some faults in this particular film, including for it being far too long.
I was told I didn't have to have an opinion on Furiosa, so I'm gonna be quiet if we're going there.
Well,
I haven't watched it.
And that is a wrap for us today, folks. We hope you had a wonderful time. We will continue to bring you the news, keep you ahead of the culture curve. And the way that you help us do so is click the like button, share, subscribe, click it, stick it to the algorithms. It is the notification bell. Drop a comment down below. Let us know your thoughts. Do you agree or disagree with George? And are you still frustrated with him over his support of Bob Iger? We would love to hear from you. Folks, wherever you are and whatever you're doing, keep learning, keep growing, and keep having fun.